This is the S2G podcast. I'm Tanya Beckritzes. In this episode, we finally turn the mic to our one managing partner you haven't heard from yet on this show, Aaron Rudberg. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal, business, tax, or investment advice, nor should it be used to evaluate any investment or security. It is not directed at or intended for any current or prospective investor in any investment in vehicle sponsored by S2G. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of capital. References to specific companies are for illustrative and educational purposes only and do not represent an endorsement or investment recommendation. The views expressed by podcast guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of S2G. For additional important information, please visit s2ginvestments.com/disclosures.
Over the last 5 years, a lot of people have talked about things like the green premium. What excites me is that we don't need the green premium to solve these issues. There are some things that I think some firms can solve that and work on that. It's going to take a little bit longer maybe now than it did a couple of years ago. But there are solutions at scale today that can be deployed that can have a meaningful impact on our environment and on the health of Americans. And so I look at those solutions and I look at the opportunity that's in front of us to scale and deploy these solutions and scale them rapidly. That's what excites me.
For the past 8 years, Aaron has guided S2G's growth from a 5-person team focused on food and agriculture to a 60-plus person investment platform spanning food and agriculture, energy, and oceans. In this episode, we dive into Aaron's journey, how it shaped his role at S2G, and why getting the culture right has been a top priority from the beginning. We discuss how purpose-driven investing has evolved over the course of his career, what at-the-seams investing looks like in practice, how some of our recent investments tie back to our thesis, and what Aaron has learned from conversations with investors around the world. I'm grateful to learn from him every day and excited to share his perspective with you all. Aaron, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's been long overdue getting you here. We've had lots of deep dives into Chuck's background, Sanjeev's background, and I'm thrilled to take this time to share more with our listeners about you, how you got to S2G, and the journey since you joined. So thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's start with a little bit about your career before S2G.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm a managing partner here at S2G. I help to oversee the day-to-day operations of the organization and have been here a little over 8 years. Prior to S2G, I really spent most of my career in and around the investment business. Started off as a venture associate, much like our associates and analyst here. Did that for a few years, and then I wanted to try the entrepreneurial adventure. I had seen how entrepreneurs were diligenced and the scrappiness that entrepreneurs use to build companies, and I wanted to see what that was like. And so I joined a software company that was just getting started, helped them grow and scale. That was very humbling. We were sold eventually, but it was a struggle and really taught me just how difficult it is to build a business from the ground up. And then from there, I was able to get some experience being on the other side of the table, being a limited partner. That was something that was fairly unique for me in terms of, in my career, understanding what it's like to be allocating capital to funds. We were focused on emerging managers, women and minority-owned funds, specifically when we started, and for 3 years helped us both raise capital, start the firm, allocate to a number of funds. I sat on a number of limited partner advisory committees, negotiated LP agreements. It was great learning just in understanding how capital flows into the sector. And then joined a firm called Baird Capital, and there we were doing venture, growth equity, private equity buyouts across the U.S., Europe, and Asia. I had the privilege of living in Europe for 3 years and helping with our UK and our German business, and then spent a lot of time in China helping us with our growth equity business there and building that out. After 10 years, Chuck Templeton, who I've known for almost 25 plus years, Chuck approached me 8.5, 9 years ago, probably now, and said, we are building something special here at S2G. Would you be interested in joining? And I spent some time getting to know him a little bit better, Sanjeev, Lucas, and ultimately joined. Yeah.
That's amazing. What a journey to S2G today. What made you ultimately make the leap? What was Chuck's sell?
One, obviously, you've spent time with Chuck. Chuck is a unique individual that has the ability to really change the direction of companies. And when he leans in, magic happens. And so that was one key attribute is I trusted Chuck. I knew who he was, what he stood for, and then spent a lot of time with Sanjeev and Lucas just trying to understand, are our values aligned? It really starts there. Do we want to build an organization that can win in the market? That's very important to me. And then I think it was very eye-opening to me, this idea of you could drive investment returns and impact in the world, positive contribution. I look back now at maybe where I was 9-10 years ago, and I was not doing purpose-driven investing in great companies, but we weren't thinking about the negative consequences of our investments. Now, that's a big part of what we think about, what we underwrite towards with our impact measurement and management focus. And so as I spent time with Chuck and Lucas and Sanjeev and really understood the direction that they wanted to take the organization, it became very clear to me that this is something that could fill a part of me that I didn't really know existed. So, I ultimately joined. It was a good set because they were looking for someone who understood how to scale and build an organization, investment organization.
And I think for me and a lot of us here, that purpose-driven piece is what gets us energized and gets us coming back every day with a lot of enthusiasm. Totally resonates. What was the market landscape then, and how do you think it's changed now? Like this notion of investing with purpose was newer at the time, and I guess just curious to hear your thoughts about how that's evolved since you've been here.
Yeah, I think a decade ago or 9 years ago, when I told my colleagues or friends what I was going to do, I think many of them scratched their head and said, "What are you talking about?" Specifically food and agriculture, but also going to a quote unquote impact firm. And it was very small part of the market. I think investment professionals weren't talking about that. There was no talk of ESG or impact measurement or any of the GIN, Iris Plus type metrics that were in the market. Obviously, things have changed now. In many ways positive. There's been a lot of challenges also. I think S2G was really one of the first investors in food and agriculture more broadly. We would go and talk to co-investors about what's happening in agriculture, what's happening in food. We would try to syndicate capital for our companies. And many investors just didn't understand the gross margin dynamics, the capital intensity, the channel dynamics. And so that's something we would have to spend a lot of time educating investors about. And we also sometimes didn't understand those things. And we learned as well along the way. And entrepreneurs were great at educating us about how they were scaling their businesses. And we learned some lessons the hard way as well. We had some success, but you tend to learn more from the companies that don't maybe go as the path that you want. And we were then able to apply that to what we did in the ocean space. And then energy obviously has had a much different path with Clean Tech 1.0 and now a resurgence in the last 5 to 7 years. So it's been a journey of our firm kind of going from early stage venture to growth and now offering both growth capital as well as credit to a lot of these companies in that missing middle, which is really where we're focused as a firm today.
Going back to the three of you, for those listeners who may not know, S2G is led by three managing partners, Chuck, Aaron, and Sanjeev. You're all very different, and I think it's a very unique Venn diagram of where you all focus. Chuck obviously brings the operator perspective with both his time founding OpenTable, involvement in other businesses like Grubhub, and just guiding many of our companies in our portfolio as an investor and board member. Sanjeev has also obviously been involved in a lot of companies, but is just a big picture macro thinker, really guides our investment strategy and 3 steps ahead often from me and where the market's heading. And you bring a lot of pragmatism, that experience in building investment firms globally over the course of your career. Would love to just talk a little bit about how have you actually approached building our organization over the course of your time here, getting us from, I think it was 5 people when you started to over 60 now.
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. We decided early on, actually before I joined, I really wanted to align with Chuck, Sanjeev, and Lucas around the culture that we wanted to have at the organization. And so we spent a half day or so prior to me joining and even accepting on aligning on the cultural pillars that we wanted to build out at the firm. And this wasn't a hard discussion. I think we were all aligned with, we wanted to have a group of people that were ambitious, very driven, want to win, but also aren't jerks. And in the investment world, there are a lot of very strong personalities and big egos. And you have to have some of that in our business. But given that we work so much every day, every weekend, late into the night for years at a time, we wanted a group that were all the attributes I mentioned in terms of driven, high IQ, high EQ, some of the most talented professionals in the world. But we didn't want people that brought a me mindset to work every day. And they had sharp elbows and were willing to stab somebody else in the back. And I think that was really important. And I was grateful for the fact that Chuck, Sanjeev, and Lucas both were all aligned with that. So with that, I think that was the cornerstone and the foundation of what we've tried to build. And I think that is the advantage we have is 5-10 years ago, most professionals didn't have that option to do something that both hits their brain and their heart.
Yeah.
And I think we have the advantage to be able to do both. That doesn't mean that we don't make hard decisions and have to sometimes raise our voice and be tough, but I think you can do it in a respectful way and with some humility and understand that sometimes companies go through difficult paths that require some of those harder decisions, but you do it with respect of others as opposed to just thinking everyone is a cog in a wheel, which I think, again, a lot of investment firms sometimes don't have that appreciation for the human nature of what we're all trying to do.
Appreciate that. You talked a bit about this already, but just to dig in a bit, we started in food and agriculture. We've since launched oceans and energy, moved from just doing venture into later stage venture and growth, and now our credit vehicle, special opportunities. What have you learned from moving from one sector to many and from one asset class to multiple? Any key takeaways for you as more the operations focused leader about how to make that successful?
I think one, it comes down to the people, understanding that hiring really good people that understand their domain, specifically whether it's equity or credit, is really important. For us, it's really about fit for purpose capital for the entrepreneurs and founders that are trying to build their businesses. So we've hired and been lucky enough to bring aboard professionals that really understand energy, understand food and ag, understand oceans at a very deep level. They've spent their careers in those sectors. Yeah. They know the channel partners, the unit economics. I think hiring subject matter experts and then surrounding yourself with operators and other advisors who really understand these sectors is critically important. And then my job and the job of our leadership is really to push to help them become the best at what they do.
Yeah.
And understand what their strengths are, their weaknesses are, and then ultimately try to push them in ways that amplify their strengths and continue to build out their opportunities for growth. I think the one thing that's been really critical for us is listening to the market, being close to the market. So when we developed our special opportunity strategy, that really came out of hearing the capital gap, the opportunity that entrepreneurs didn't have access to credit, or I know you've had Andrea and Marissa on the podcast before. There was a gap in the missing middle, specifically around project finance, hardware as a service financing. And so we developed a tool to essentially enable that, to help companies scale and meet the demands of their customers. And so I think if you're close to the customer, you're close to the entrepreneur, which again is our customer, that helps us develop tools and fit for purpose capital solutions that can really help this industry scale.
Super interesting. And one of the things we talk about a lot are the seams between our sectors. How have you seen the sort of deep sector expertise across our sectors evolve into some maybe interesting opportunities that connects them?
Yeah, one of the things that has been really important for us is, and maybe an example to use here is what we did with Clear Frontier and on the food and ag side. This was an idea we had that came out of engagement with corporates. So again, being close to the customer, we were speaking quite a bit with a lot of the large CPGs that were managing they were seeing the demand from consumers around organic products and cleaner, healthier foods. This is probably now almost 10 years ago. Actually, when I joined, Lucas and Sanjeev and Chuck and Matt Walker and others would talk about this idea of how do we produce more organic or regenerative products in the U.S. Here we were in the U.S. producing cheap commodity products, exporting that to the world, and yet we're importing the more high-value products and allowing non-domestic producers to capture that value in the value chain. And so we stepped back and we said, okay, this doesn't make as much sense. We're not necessarily farmland owners, and this is more at the seams of the sector or the
Right.
asset classes as opposed to the
Sure.
sectors. But we went out and we started Clear Frontier, which is a farmland investment platform. We leveraged our relationships with the large CPGs. We hired a team of experts, so Justin Brook and Angus Selby, who were both at CPPIB and Macquarie and other professional experience, building and managing large-scale farmland portfolios.
Yeah.
And we used our experience more in venture and innovation and growth equity, partnered with their experience in real assets, farmland, to build and scale a farmland platform that's investing in regenerative ag and organic production. And that they now are 6-7 years into that journey, manage over 25,000 acres, and they're having a major influence on the scale of helping farmers in America really drive profitability around these higher value ingredients. And so that it came out of, again, conversations with the customer, conversations with farmers directly, our knowledge, a little bit of farmland and real assets,
Yep.
but also paired with kind of venture growth equity mindset and creating a product that was not existing in the market at that time.
Such a great example. One of the first things I worked on, I think my first week here, so I'll have a nice
Their initial
memory
website,
of
I think
leaning
you
into
built
that, yeah.
the few days before COVID
I think
started.
that's right. What do you see as the opportunity ahead for this more innovative, sort of fit for purpose capital model?
That's a big question.
I
I think
know.
that in many ways, there's a lot of dialogue out in the market these days about the attack on cleaner, healthier solutions. And I have a different view on that. I think when I look back on 8-9 years ago, when I entered this market, it was so small in its infancy. You were coming off of, to some degree, Clean Tech 1.0 that had seen a huge capital increase and then a lot of failures. The last 7-8 years has seen a step function in what I think is the floor in this industry. Different parties are talking about clean, healthy food and soils, getting pesticides out, which is interesting in its own right. Clean energy has broken through. In many ways, clean electrons, molecules are a major part of the conversation and have won in many markets. And it is something that I think, while there is a lot of difficulty and challenges ahead, I think that we are only just getting started. And there is a major trend. This is not a fad, major trend and tidal wave that is coming where people are now more aware of the food they're eating. They're more aware of the environmental impact of their products. And it's something that will only continue to increase the access to capital, because I think what also investors are seeing is they can make money backing these solutions.
Yeah.
And so more and more capital is flowing to these markets. I'll give a just quick little story that I heard yesterday. I was speaking with an operator who is someone who's involved with some of our companies. And he said, I was running a factory actually here in Illinois. And in that factory, they were using diesel yard trucks around their factory. And their factory had been around for 80 years, but now a community had been built around it. And he said, we replaced our yard trucks with Orange EV. And he said the actual impact of that on the community,
Yeah.
he said the community did not like us. They were sending us angry letters every month. When we went to electric yard trucks, the diesel footprint obviously went away. Most importantly, they were quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, actually, the community, we were getting letters that were saying, thank you so much.
Wow.
They invited us onto the community development board that one of our members of our management team joined. And he's like, all of a sudden, this small thing that we did, obviously a major investment, but he's like, this small thing we did actually made us friendly in the community, which we didn't expect. That was not something we had underwritten, but our leadership was so much happier. And so it was an interesting story of kind of the impact sometimes we have that we don't think about.
That's amazing. What a great story. I'm sure you were very thrilled to
Oh,
hear
I
that
was.
story.
Yeah, I was.
You teed up my next question pretty nicely with that answer, but if you have more to add, we can lean in here. But what does investing with purpose mean in practice at S2G? And how might that be different than what other people might think of when they hear the word impact investing?
Yeah, I can't speak to how people would interpret impact investing, but I do think that at times we in the industry tend to pigeonhole ourselves into certain language that I don't think is helpful for the overall focus of what we're trying to do. Ultimately, we want to drive financial returns and positive impact through our investments. We are trying to compete with every other firm out in the marketplace on returns. That is very important to us. At the same time, we don't want to sacrifice the impact we're trying to have. And companies generally have negative impact or positive impact in the world. And I think that it's important to understand what are the positive externalities and negative externalities that you are producing. And every company has those. And I do think we are at a point in our species development where we're realizing that it's important to have companies that stand for something, that have positive attributes, that they contribute to society in a positive way, especially when there are many dynamics around AI and other things that are scary and threaten people. And so when I think about what we're trying to do, all I can speak to is we want to back great entrepreneurs that want to build great companies that can deploy solutions quickly or already are being deployed. For example, we spent a lot of time in this missing middle. We've talked a lot about that. I know in your podcast as well. It's really important to us to see companies that are not an idea and innovation that's just starting, but really a proven technology that needs capital to scale. And that's where I think we can have a major impact. Two of our colleagues, Frank O'Sullivan and Gokul, both did this report several years ago on the missing middle, and that has really influenced how we've deployed capital over the last few years. And I think we've had a major impact on GHG emission reductions, water saved, healthy meals, et cetera, that I think is really important for us to demonstrate, even to ourselves, the impact we're having.
Speaking of demonstrating impact, we just released our first annual report, which summarizes our thesis and the accomplishments of our team and portfolio companies. It ended up being quite a bit longer than we originally anticipated because so much has happened, especially since our first report and in particular this year. But are there any key takeaways from the report you'd like to highlight?
Well, I think there's a few things that I think the report does a great job of summarizing. One is it just gives a broad history and overview of what we stand for, who we are. I think for many outside individuals, it's hard to sort of sometimes understand what we're doing. And we're a fairly active organization. And I think that report did a great job of both telling the arc of where we've been, because that's an important part of who we are, but also what's important to us in terms of our North Stars. We finally, I think, have articulated that really well. A lot of credit to Heather, Maya, and yourself on helping us define that very clearly, what our goals are within 10 years, but also in 25 years. Those are really the North Stars that our teams are trying to accomplish. And so that, I think, was very important for people that read our report. And even internally, I think it helps us understand what the guide rails are, or guardrails, I should say, are. Secondly, I'd probably say that it just shows that we're very active across our sectors, whether it's oceans, energy, food. I think we've done a good job of articulating what we're going to measure. And we obviously have a number of companies that we lay out and we talk about the measurements for their impact. But what I really appreciated about the report is we go through details in food and ag, in oceans, in energy, where we're having an impact, what that looks like at a specific case study of a company, and the work they're doing to really drive change.
Yeah, I think it's so important to celebrate their stories and share their accomplishments when obviously we hope to be more than a check, but they're doing the hard work on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We launched this report at a time of what feels like some great change. We've had some market correction, some changing sentiment about climate, a huge AI hype cycle, and a mandate to build, baby, build, and get back to U.S. dominance. Just very curious what your perspective is on this pivotal moment and how should we think about being investors at this time?
Yeah, I think it's a great time to be an investor in the space right now. I think that there is a lot of noise out there. There is a lot of negativity in the world. But again, as I said earlier, it is such a great time to be allocating capital behind entrepreneurs and founders and families that have built great businesses that maybe even don't think of themselves as impact investors. I know a number of our recent investments, these founders didn't think of themselves that way. They were just making better, faster, cheaper solutions that were also environmentally better. And so I'm actually quite optimistic, quite positive about what's happening in the world. There's definitely a lot of clouds and some thunder and lightning, but that's okay because you need the rain for the green shoots that come after that. I think this is where, Frankly, I think organizations like ours thrive in terms of understanding these sectors at a very deep level. We've seen cycles. We understand the commodity nature of these cycles. We understand the geopolitical risks that tariffs or other commodity flows will play when it comes to a company that's maybe sitting in Wisconsin or Arizona or in South Carolina. So these are, I think, critical aspects that are really important to understand. We understand purchase behavior and what's important. Fundamentally, I think over the last 5 years, a lot of people have talked about things like the green premium, and that's something we need to lower. What excites me is that we don't need the green premium to solve these issues. There are some things that I think some firms can solve that and work on that. It's going to take a little bit longer maybe now than it did a couple of years ago. But there are solutions at scale today that can be deployed that can have a meaningful impact on our environment and on the health of Americans. And so I look at those solutions and I look at the opportunity that's in front of us to scale and deploy these solutions and scale them rapidly. That's what excites me.
Yeah, that's great.
Maybe one other point to make, it's easier to invest when everyone else is investing in a space. When the tide is high and everyone's doing well. But that isn't necessarily and we all know this, that isn't necessarily the time when we all make the best investments. Yeah. It's when the tide goes out and everyone's exposed that you get a sense of who really is not only committed, but that's when it really tests your resolve. And I think actually history shows that's when you make the best returns.
Yeah, that's interesting. That leads right into my next question, which is where are we in this market correction that some of our entrepreneurs have been feeling as they've been looking to go forward with their next rounds of raising capital? Where do you think we sit in that tide, if you will?
I don't know if it's a market correction per se. I would say that there's obviously been a pullback in funding, but that in many ways is going to separate the wheat from the chaff. There's companies that are capital efficient, that aren't just spending money on tchotchkes and all the other fancy stuff. It goes back to the CEOs and leadership teams that are focused on unit economics, competing with commodities, better, faster, cheaper, and they are capital efficient. And I think years ago when capital was flowing very well, an entrepreneur could be counting quarters and dollars. Now you got to be counting pennies. These are industries, food, agriculture, energy, oceans, where pennies matter.
Yeah.
You talk to all the large, big corporates, pennies matter in those industries. And so I think the companies that are competing against them are trying to shift those markets. They need to be thinking the same way. And sometimes venture capitalists or investors like ourselves can sometimes lose sight of that and encourage bad behavior. And that's where I think, again, the winners will thrive in this environment.
Are there still pathways for exit in our sector?
Absolutely. You're seeing that even now. There's been a number of companies that have gone public. There's a number of M&A events underway that I'm aware of. At the end of the day, if you're building a really good technology, a really good company, other companies are going to want to either buy you, they'll obviously make the decision, do I compete or acquire you, or you have the opportunity again to go public.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to really build just great companies and take market share from the incumbents. And ultimately in society, we have for hundreds of years and for another 100 plus years, we will support and want better solutions. And so that is the challenge, I think, for all of our companies. Just continue to improve and really listen to your customer and identify what they want. And this is true both of our companies, but also ourselves. We need to be in touch with the customers, whether that's investors and asset allocators, whether that's entrepreneurs and founders, and making sure that we are ahead of the curve and we've identified what their needs are. And sometimes that requires you to listen very closely to what their concerns are, what their demands are, things of that nature.
One thing on the topic of operational efficiency that's been coming up a lot and where we've been spending time is thinking about the advances in AI and how entrepreneurs and company leaders can use those to drive greater operational efficiency. On the flip side of that, we have an AI hype cycle that's unlocking other opportunities to change business models and launch new products. So just curious your thoughts on how should investors who are interested in food and agriculture, oceans energy, think about this moment in AI boom?
So I think of AI as a powerful tool. It's not necessarily a silver bullet. It's a massive accelerator, though. And maybe the best way to talk about this is talk about a company of ours and how AI can apply to that. So I think of Enchandia, one of our companies in the electrification of maritime vessels. They build advanced battery systems for ferries, workboats, essentially replacing diesel engines that are both dirty and noisy, as I mentioned earlier. On its own, great decarbonization story. But then when you layer AI on top of that, battery management systems that generate massive amounts of data and heat and other things, AI can process that data, predict failures before they happen. It can optimize schedules and extend the life of these battery systems as well. And so I think about ultimately how AI is improving not only Enchandia, but it's improving the performance for their customers. It's reducing downtime. It's lowering the cost of ownership, which accelerates adoption. And so this is an accelerator in many ways to what their core business is, which is building battery systems. And that's where I think AI matters. It's not necessarily replacing the physical attributes, but it's really making them more powerful and amplifying their ability to drive more adoption and just be more scalable. The lesson isn't avoid the hype. I've been involved in the .com boom and a number of other both hypes and down cycles. And we tend to get too excited and sometimes too depressed during times. That's human nature. So I think AI is here to stay, but you also have to be careful not to think of AI just for AI's sake. There's got to be some real substance. And I think that's what's really exciting is companies and entrepreneurs are really just starting to discover the power of that. And there's massive capital investments happening from the large tech companies in this as well that we're all going to benefit from. And so we should lean into that.
This year, our team has been really working to invest in filling the gap of the missing middle. We've made several investments in companies that are a bit late stage venture, early stage growth. And some of them might seem a bit more off the beaten path. So I'd love to pose out to you, Aaron, the question of some of the investments we've made and maybe get your reaction to unpack them and give context to how it ties together to our overall thesis. You teed up one, Enchandia. So they are obviously a global leader in maritime battery systems. How does that maritime focus align with Food Ag Oceans and what we're trying to do more globally with our investment strategy?
Yeah, I feel like this is like quick hitting a little bit. You got to say the company, then I respond. And maybe with each of these companies, I'll use the example from my own experience. I'm in San Francisco. I get on a ferry. I'd rather that ferry be electric than it would be diesel for a number of reasons, noise, pollution, et cetera. And so Enchandia is really tapping into that and giving operators a solution that can help them scale and provide a better solution for both the community, but also for the water, et cetera. And we ship a lot of products across the seas, and Enchandia has the opportunity over time to scale to meet that demand.
Great. Arones is working in wind. Wind has had some media coverage lately for some pushback on it here in the US, but they're a global leader in robotic inspection, maintenance, and AI-powered diagnostics. What are your thoughts on how this fits in and other growth opportunities going forward?
Yeah, wind power has been one of the fastest growing sources of renewable energy, and turbines need constant maintenance. Traditionally, that has meant rope access technicians climbing 300-foot towers to do inspections and repairs, which is slow, costly, and risky. And Aronis has built these robotic systems that can really clean, inspect, and repair these turbines faster, safer, and at a lower cost. Again, better, faster, cheaper. And so that for us is really exciting because they've proven this out. They've got contracts with global providers and they are winning in the market. And so being partners with them to help them scale. And in fact, if deployment of new wind is delayed, that actually could potentially help them because these projects are going to need more maintenance as well. And for us, we really like this company and think there's a huge tailwinds behind them.
On a very different end of the spectrum, Pix Health is one we've made recently, and also our investment helped fund their acquisition of FarmBox. Can you talk about how that fits into our food and ag thesis and what gets you excited about this company?
Yeah, so we've been focused on food as medicine, food as health for many years. What we like about Pix is that this is a company that is merging the engagement around our most vulnerable population, citizens that really struggle with mental health and other challenges. Data has shown that food insecurity is one of the major issues that population is dealing with. Historically, when we've approached the healthcare space, we don't think about food. Typically, what has happened is more drugs, more products are being sold to consumers. What we believe is that food can really change behaviors. It can change your mindset. It can improve your physical and mental health. And Pix is executing on that strategy. And so this really fits with the combination of digital engagement with citizens and their populations directly, and then also pairing that with food to be the whole self. And I think it's a really powerful company that can have a major impact on people on a one-to-one basis that I think excites me, and we're just getting started there.
Yeah. How about Sojo? So this is one that both our energy team and our food and agriculture team lean into as we were diligencing and looking to make that investment. And obviously now as we continue to support them, talk a little bit about robotics and why we were interested in modular packaging solutions.
Yeah, so packaging is a major opportunity in the spaces that we invest in, whether it's the materials that are being used or just the amount of waste that's happening. Sojo specifically is attacking the waste end of this in terms of when you're packaging and repackaging products, how you do that in an efficient way where you try to either reuse or just be more efficient. This company has had a lot of success, specifically initially in the beverage industry, as the consumer tastes have changed and continue to change. They're meeting the customer where they are through these robotics automated solutions so that you don't need to build a whole new factory or set up a whole new supply chain to manage the consumer demand, and you reduce your waste stream. And so that fits with both our energy theme around it's more energy efficient. There's a huge savings there, as well as reducing the amount of packaging that's being used, because a lot of that goes to the landfill or it's not recycled or composted. And so we're solving those issues from two fronts. And it's exciting to see this at the seams idea come to life through a company where I think the CEO and that leadership team appreciated that we approached it with a more holistic view where we had experts in energy and experts from our food and ag team working hand in glove to both identify the risks and the opportunities with the company, but also how do we scale and help them grow.
Yeah, that's great. Shifting gears.
Okay.
I know the past 12 months you've been traveling a ton all around the globe, talking a lot about our work and our thesis and our team. And I would just love to hear any takeaways from those conversations that you maybe gave you greater insight into the investor landscape or market globally and how that might shape where S2G heads in the future.
We've spent a lot of time on the road over the last 12 to 18 months talking to institutional investors, family offices, entrepreneurs in Asia, Australia, Middle East, Europe, as well as across the U.S. And I think resiliency would be a word that comes to mind. I think investors are very resilient. They continue to be very interested in how do we invest behind companies, funds that are driving positive impact. What I think is becoming more clear is that investors want to see returns. They want to see demonstration that impact investing, climate investing, you pick your word, can deliver financial returns. Otherwise, it needs to be classified as concessionary in their philanthropy bucket. And so for me, that's been what's exciting is talking to investors, showing them case studies of companies that have done very well in the market, but also hearing from them what their concerns are, where they see opportunity. And that's why I think I continue to remain very positive. I see capital flowing into these markets. I think we as a firm are very well positioned relative to others globally. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've been humbled many times. We've had a number of successes as well, but it's been humbling at times. And that's, I think, those learnings have helped us at least think about our positioning, our value add for entrepreneurs. But ultimately, it's about what you do in the future. And the next investment has to be the best one we've done yet. And I think that insights from a lot of these investors globally and entrepreneurs has provided us a good foundation to build on.
Yeah. Are there any common myths about S2G that you debunk in these conversations that you'd like to take the time to do so now?
We are no longer S2G Ventures. We are S2G Investments. Part of that is our heritage of moving from venture historically to more growth equity and credit. So that's an important one. I'd say another one is I think a number of investors or entrepreneurs don't always understand the separation between S2G and Builder's Vision. Builder's Vision is a great partner of ours, and our legacy and heritage being both affiliated and owned by Builder's Vision is important. It allows us to get access and build relationships with non-traditional networks, specifically, I'd say families around the world. We understand that history, but we also understand that personality profile in many ways because we came from that. Lucas is our partner, and it's very informative as we think about how we could be a capital solution alongside them. We work closely together, but we were separate. And then probably the other piece is that these industries are hard. It's tough tech is what we call it. Commodity industries, lower margin generally, long adoption cycles, capital intense. There's regulatory sensitivity. And we think about that every day. And we think we built a toolkit to really attack and go after that. But I think that education is important as investors think about us relative to an AI investment,
right? Yeah.
Or some other investment. I think it's just important to understand the structural elements of the space relative to others.
Yeah. How do you position those structural constraints and hard factors to overcome alongside the opportunity? How do you sell the opportunity for these sectors above and beyond an AI investment, for example?
Yeah, I don't compete with AI investments. We have companies in our portfolio that are using and leveraging AI. We've got software companies that are more AI centric. However, a lot of what we're doing represent the attributes that I mentioned. And I think, first off, it's understanding the arena you're operating in. And I think sometimes investors don't understand that, or they don't articulate that, or they just have misconceptions about how you scale solutions in regenerative agriculture or clean energy, et cetera. So I think, one, we really understand that at a very deep level. We are talking to a lot of the industry players in that space. And ultimately, we believe that information asymmetry is what gives us an advantage. Mm-hmm. We're going to know a lot more than anybody else. And that's something that, given our network, given our team, which our team is out there every day talking to people, gathering insights and information, and ultimately we capture that and we hope to use that to generate alpha in our portfolio. And so that's a key part of how we drive both better deal flow, but also information advantage, frankly, than others.
Yeah. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'd love to end on what gets you most excited looking at the next decade of investing across our sectors. And any closing thoughts?
Oh, there's a lot that gets me excited. I think probably most importantly is, you called it a correction. I think it's good for the industry. And that's what actually gets me excited. As I said earlier, when things get tough, that's really when the best perform. And so I'm most excited about the next couple of years and what could be tougher economic environment, some of the geopolitical challenges. And I think that's where, again, the information advantage should benefit us. We have capital. We've been blessed with that, and I'm very grateful for that. We now need to find great entrepreneurs, founders, family-backed businesses that we can partner with to help them scale. And I think we have a history of being high-integrity professionals that you would want in your corner to help you scale your business through the good times and the bad times. And we've proven that we can be there during both the ups and the downs. And so I look at the next couple of years and think it's a huge opportunity for our firm to really separate ourselves from others and be a leader both in the US, but also I would say in Europe. I think Europe right now is at a significant crossroads, but there's a massive opportunity to scale the types of solutions that we're investing in across that market. And we're seeing some of that already. And I think as you watch our firm over the next couple of years, you'll see more deployment across Europe as well as the US. The US is a core market, obviously, for us. But I think that's what gives me a lot of hope. And I'd say ultimately it comes back to the people. We started there, and that's what gets me out of bed every day, is working with great teammates that push each other, don't always agree. We argue a lot behind closed doors or sometimes, in open rooms, but it's what makes you better. You can't always agree. And what I believe and I think is true is we all just want to win, and we want to get the right answers. Chuck frequently says it's about getting it right, not being right. And that's a mantra that I think we all live by, and we push each other. And I think growth is really the mindset.
Thank Thank you so much, Erin. That's a great way to end. I really appreciate your time, and I'm also very excited for the next decade of our future. So thanks for joining.
Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the S2G podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, or share it with a friend. For more information or to connect with us, check out s2ginvestments.com.